Good.
All right, we are going
You gonna
live
start?
and hit that.
Hello, and welcome to another episode. This is our second episode of Caribbean Feedback. I am your host, Deroy Selden, and our guests are Karen. We start with you.
Hi, good evening. What else would you like me to say? I'm so glad that you're joining us this evening.
Mm,
All right, who's next in line?
I guess it's me, all right, good evening, everyone. How you all doing? Welcome to Caribbean Feedback. Did you say Caribbean Feedback or Caribbean Chat,
Caribbean
Devlin?
Feedback.
You said Caribbean Feedback? All
This
right,
is Caribbean
because
Feedback.
don't confuse that with Caribbean Chat, although Caribbean Chat is also part of the family. Welcome tonight. Good night. Welcome, one and all. And Mr. Curtis, you could take it from there.
Hello, good evening. My name is Curtis Henry from Caribbean Chat. You can find us on Facebook. It's a great pleasure to be here. Mr. Songden, I heard you had a little issue this evening arriving
Yes,
on
sir.
time.
I had to run for my
I
life.
heard you were walking from Brooklyn or something like that. What happened?
No. Well, we had hurricane winds today. We were somewhat affected by it. It started raining like crazy, then the winds, and all day long it stopped.
And pull up, Mr.
Yeah,
Songden.
but no, it's peaceful.
I remember last week being teased and taunted about living in Florida with all the alligators and snakes and hurricanes that we have down here. You live in New Jersey, and now you are telling me that you all had a hurricane?
Yes, we had hurricane winds. It's not the first; we've had it before. With the only difference between you down here in Florida and us up here is that we have no crocodiles, no alligators, no snakes to deal with. But outside outside of that, it was all good.
The hurricane passed us and continue in New Jersey.
It
Okay.
passes through quickly, though. I mean, it started last night, but according to the weather, this was one of the fastest moving hurricane force winds we've ever had, especially because it was over the land. So that in itself was a good thing. So I'm not complaining.
Yeah, there was some tornadoes. We actually had a tornado in Delaware, but down in the
Okay.
Middletown area. So, we're hoping that the folks down there are doing okay.
Okay.
And I saw a friend of mine's in Queens. His garage got unearthed. So he said, I called him earlier. He said, yes, the garage is palancing. He said, palance. So, that's my friend Alton from Tropical Fet. So I spoke with him, and he's doing pretty good. And then if you go on Facebook, you'll see some pictures from the New York area in terms of what the wind did in Brooklyn. So we're hoping that all is well with the folks there. and we're sending a prayer to the folks out in Beirut
Okay.
today. They had an explosion. I hope
Oh yeah, I heard about that.
I hope it's not too. I understand there's some casualties and some deaths, so we want to. But to bring it back, I'm happy that we're here again. This is our second episode, and I'm excited about what we're gonna do.
I am too, and we also have a special guest that we will be introducing later on in the show. In the meantime, guys, anything else going on in your life or out there in Florida, in Delaware, anything else, or here in Jersey? I already told you what's going on in Jersey. Um, but this was quite an interesting week. You know, um, your president was, I guess he did some kind of news conference today.
My president.
Whoever, I just
Everyone disowns.
whoever wants to claim him as their president, that's all good. But apparently, he did a news conference today, and his statement pertaining to the coronavirus was, if I remember correctly, it is what it is. And so I'm pretty sure the media is going to run with that, and that's as much as I would say about that situation.
Pray for the president.
I think that's enough. I have nothing.
Speaking of prayer, do you think prayers can sometimes be wasted?
Wasted?
I'm just asking. Is it a possibility that it can be wasted,
I don't think
especially in
prayers are
someone that you
wasted.
know will never change or have no
Pray that
likelihood
you
of changing?
survive this person.
What's that? What's that?
Pray
I
that
missed
you
that.
survive dealing with this person.
I
It
know.
works.
I'm talking about the guy in the White House. That's what I'm talking
Yes,
about.
I
I
know.
hear prayer
I know.
changes things though. That I heard that one. So
But in this case, it's in this
That's a
case,
wonderful segue. That is a wonderful segue into our segment this evening,
Mm-hmm.
because so many times we have issues with family members, and somehow the grandparents believe that they could have just rubbed their head with some oil, say some prayers, and it would wash it all away. Most times back in the Caribbean, we used to say, not we, but the generation that went by, or my grandparents used to say, the boy had Jumbi on him. Or in Jamaica, you would say the boy had Topic on him.
Duppy or Jumbi.
Yeah, or Jumbi.
Jumbi.
Realizing that,
Listen, don't mess it up. It's Jumbi.
what?
you come back again with
Well,
that
I'm going back with this pronunciation thing like last week.
Jumbi.
I can't with the
Jumbi.
fellas, you know.
Jumbi. So as I was saying, we look at people with issues, and 2 generations ago they just cast it off. He have some evil spirit following him.
Mhm.
Why is this boy behaving like that? And they rub him with some oil and they pray, ring a bell, and from years from the child growing up until they turn into adulthood and they never get diagnosed. And years later, we realize that we were dealing with mad people. So this is a nice segue into the program. Karen, what are your thoughts on mental health issues in the household we grew up in and in the Caribbean?
Well, we started this conversation about 3 weeks ago, and we were essentially looking at the family. And then I got a little more curious about my own island and learned a great deal more about the needs that are on my island of Jamaica, as far as mentally ill people who have very little access. And so that's why what stimulated this particular conversation tonight.
Mhm.
I have a quote that I wanted to open with from Cecilia Livingston, who's a writer for the Jamaica Gleaner. She quotes, "You see them walking around, dirty, unkempt, and badly in need of attention. There's no second guessing if these people are mentally ill. The greater danger, though, is in those living under your roof who show no immediate sign that they are precariously on the edge of becoming unhinged." And to me, that sort of encompassed everything that we're about to discuss, whether it is in the family, in a residential, in a commercial area, or in the community, or in the country at large, which I found some fascinating information about what is lacking in Jamaica and other Caribbean islands. So I'm looking forward to that discussion taking place.
And the thing is too is that we grow up and we always say that people are mad or they are crazy, not realizing that. I mean, a lot of times we say it jokingly. When someone acts a certain way, we say, "Man, you mad or you crazy," not realizing that they may be suffering from not just depression but schizophrenia. Which according to an article that I'm looking at, um, schizophrenia and depression are the most common mental illness on the island of Jamaica. I don't know about the other islands, but and it's real because sometimes you walk around and you see people just talking to themselves, and you say something to them and it just tick them off. They go off over the edge, and so. Um, I grew up thinking, hey, that was normal, to be honest with you. That's just how people behave, not realizing that it's a form of mental illness, you know?
Historically, Jamaicans have not prioritized mental illness. It's only in the last 2 decades that has come to the forefront, the great need on the island.
Hmm.
There's so many stigmas, the sense of disgrace associated with being mentally ill, or there's so many taboos, either religion, custom, culture, that prevents people from seeking help. And there is an effort being placed by several organizations in Jamaica to sort of take away the stigma, a sense of, as if you should be embarrassed that you need help in some way. There's a lot of effort being placed on the island to sort of improve that right now. And for the last couple of years, that's been going fairly well.
Okay, so according to this article that I'm reading, there are several signs of mental illness, and I don't know if any of these. I didn't know that obesity was also associated with mental illness. That's new.
Eating disorders.
Eating disorder, is that a form of mental illness?
That is a symptom of
A
someone who's
symptom of
mentally ill.
it. Okay.
Someone who's very depressed will have eating disorders associated with it.
They can
Especially
either
major
eat too much
depression.
or yeah. Also, fatigue is another one that I was unaware of. There's several symptoms that they're saying. Chronic pain. Didn't know that pain is associated with mental illness as well. And so doesn't mean that if you feel a pain now you gotta think that you're it could be just something else. It could be old age or it could be something else, arthritis, whatever. But yeah, we joke about it a lot, not realizing that it's a serious situation.
Those of us who joked about it as well, many times we didn't understand.
We didn't understand.
So us laughing about it meant that we were unaware as well and uneducated about
Exactly.
it. And it's a sickness that you can't necessarily, you see the symptoms, but you can't look at someone and give them a diagnosis and say, this person is this is how badly it is, and it's really a serious situation that we have to really start paying attention if we're not paying attention from before.
And I also think that some of those beatings that we used to get, not whipping, but beatings that we used to get, is somewhat associated with that mental illness, because there is no way a parent, an aunt, or an uncle can beat your kids some rough, hard beating. Because those weren't spanking, those are beating.
Well, Delroy, I think that particular issue, that's a show all by itself. I wouldn't go so far as to call my grandmother crazy, but she did some crazy things. And unfortunately, we tend to bring that into our own lives. What we learn, unfortunately, is only what we tend to practice.
But crazy is still a form of mental illness.
Yeah, crazy is crazy, but we leave the beatings and stuff. That's a whole other conversation, a whole other topic that we need to get into.
All right. So having said that, we have a specialist, and she will be with us momentarily. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm really looking forward to hearing what she has to say on the topic. And so I will listen keenly, and I'm sure we will have questions to ask as well. So hopefully she will be with us shortly. But in the meantime, any other pressing issues on
No,
anyone's
I
mind that you want to address?
from what? I'm sorry, I missed that.
No, I was asking if
First,
there's any other concerns or issues that you would like to address
In reference to the topic,
in reference to the topic or even some other topic.
one of the things I'd like to learn about is you have now I don't know if this is an illness, but you may have someone who would be 35, but when you talk to them, they're 19, you know. So, in physically, they're older, but mentally, you're speaking to a teenager,
I
you
think
know.
you are talking to me because I've been told several times that on the phone, when I'm talking on the phone, I sound like a child.
but Sam, are you
Um,
talking about a sound?
No, we're not talking about the sound. You're talking about
and
the
behavior.
how they
The
would
developmental level.
how exactly how they will
Okay.
analyze in the conversation. It's really
Okay.
more analytically, you know. So when you think someone of who's 35 or older may relate to a certain thing a certain way, you
Not
realize that you're
necessarily at
speaking
an
to yeah. So
not
I
necessarily at an adult level is what you're saying.
correct.
Okay.
So
Okay.
although they look adult, you know, you're actually talking to a teenager. I'm wondering if that also is related to the subject, and how we can understand that, or is it directly related? Is it indirectly related? That's something I would definitely like to get a little insight on as well.
Okay. All right. I think our special guest is ready. Am I correct?
I hope so.
All right. Our special guest is a child of God, a daughter to Ivan and Beryl Barnes. She's a mother to a son, Tyron Barnes. She's also a mental health specialist, a trained radio broadcaster, a publisher, an author, a painter, and a paraprofessional. She's currently working with special needs children in the school system of Gwinnett County, Loganville, Georgia. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome the Reverend Dr. Judith Barnes. Good evening, Dr. Barnes. How
Hey
are you?
guys,
Welcome.
Great
thank you for
having you
having
here.
me. On Caribbean, do you say Caribbean or you say Caribbean?
Caribbean feedback.
Caribbean feedback. Thank you for
Caribbean
having me on.
feedback.
You're welcome.
Feedback. I said feedback.
Okay.
Yeah, she
What
did.
did
Dr.
what did you
Barnes.
think I said?
Dr. Barnes.
Yes,
Or
sir.
should I say Dr. Judith?
Dr. Judith is fine.
I don't know how much of the conversation you heard, but we were here discussing mental illness in the family and the communities in which we were raised.
I think your
Correct me if
mic
I'm
is.
wrong,
I'm
but
sorry, your mic is muted. Please unmute your mic, Curtis.
No, it doesn't say mute here. You can't
Okay.
hear me?
no, that's me. That's
No,
me.
you're good,
That's
Doctor.
me.
Oh, okay.
Yes, Dr. Dr.
Yes,
Barnes, allow me to.
Dr. Barnes, allow me to repeat myself. We were discussing issues, mental issues in family members in the community which we grew up in the Caribbean. My understanding, the actual definition of insanity is mental stress. At least this is what the dictionary says. Mental stress of such a severe nature that a person cannot distinguish fantasy from reality. They cannot conduct themselves due to psychosis or is subject to uncontrollable behavior. This definition, according to the dictionary, can describe quite a few people I know now. So
Including yourself? Sorry, go ahead.
how can we as regular citizens look at someone and define whether or not this is a mad person that you're speaking to?
Well, first of all, let's get rid of the word mad and let's get rid of the word crazy. in the profession of psychology, we're not supposed to be using those terms. They're not healthy terms to use. Mentally ill, that kind of stuff. Those are the terms that we're supposed to be using. What you just said is a broad picture that you mentioned psychosis. That's just too much information in one place. The beginning of what you said is more like it. It's where we are disengaged from reality. And remember, mental illness does not always mean psychosis. It doesn't always mean, it's most of the times, a lot of times it has to do with depression, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, like you mentioned earlier. But not every mental illness puts you in a state where you're disconnected from reality. You understand what I'm saying? Because you mentioned that, and that's not always true. People can be actively involved in life, daily living, and still have mental illness, especially like, for instance, depression.
But what are the rules of engagement, though? How do we deal with someone who just seems to be off their rocker?
And there you go, using those terms again. There's no off the rocker. Okay. Listen, the bottom line is that we all have some degree of mental illness, whether we like it or not. If you're going to go by the definition of what they call the DSM-5, DSM-7, which is the psychiatric, it's their Bible. It tells all the different diagnoses, it has different codes, and it tells you they have code numbers for each diagnosis. And so that details all these different situations that we're talking about. But there are people who are trained that you can look at somebody and tell that they have an issue going on. Now, you talk about regular people. You will say, for instance, us. You can't really tell unless somebody's behavior is really outrageous. You can't really tell that they have a mental illness. So if you want me to tell you that I can teach you skills to identify someone, not necessarily.
I remember growing up in Trinidad, there was a particular guy in the neighborhood. I don't know if I should call the name, but everybody knew him. Primus was his name. And he walked around laughing all the time. And the story that went around, what I heard from my grandmother, is that somewhere in the 50s, 60s, he came to America or some foreign, America, England, Canada, wherever it might have been, and he worked, sent all his money home to his family members. And when he was finally satisfied, done with America or wherever he was, he packed up and he returned home. And upon his arrival, he said, okay, how much money we have? And everyone looked at him and said, what do you mean? He said, the money, how much money we have in the bank? They said, there is no money. He said, what happened to the money I've been sending home? Well, we thought that was for us. We spent it.
Wow.
And he laughed. And that man was laughing for the rest of his life.
Wow.
He walked the street and suddenly he would break out into laugh. And he laughed. And everyone looked at him and said, he's crazy. It wasn't until my teenage years I observed him closely. And that laugh, I never forget it. It was painful. From a distance, you may think he was laughing, but every time that laugh was done, it was nothing but excruciating pain on his face. And that remind me of a saying, all skin teeth ain't laugh. So what does it take for someone who's functioning normally 1 minute and just all of a sudden they're off their rocker?
Okay. You and I talked about this before. It's not 1 minute. A lot of what happens to us in life is progressional. So something happens along the way in our lives. Like I said to you earlier, you can get a cut, you can get a sore, and maybe you cover it. And after a while, what happens to the sore, it gets infected because you keep covering it up. You're not letting it loose, so it doesn't get any help, it doesn't get better. What happens to our psyche is that we get traumatized, we get hurt. And the moment that it happens, first of all, the story that you told. Now, I don't know if he told him did he ask them to save the money for him? Because that's important. Did he ask them to put the money in the bank for him? Or did he just say, here's the money I'm sending for you and they just spent it. I don't know what the situation was. But if he thought that he was sending it to them to save, first of all, that's bad communication, poor communication, because he should have said, hey, I want this money in the bank. And first of all, he shouldn't have sent it to them. He should have saved it wherever he was and then taken it there. But that's another matter. So since he didn't specify to them apparently that he wanted it saved, they felt it was fine for them to spend it. Now that's not only miscommunication, that's thievery. That's just a bunch of thieves. That's my unqualified opinion. It has nothing to do with psychiatry or psychology. So the thing is that what happens is that we get traumatized. That's a trauma. If you've been sending money someplace all this time and you're expecting it to be there when you get there, and then they say it's not there, especially if it's a lot of money, what he suffered, from what I can tell, he was traumatized because he had plans. He had everything set up to use this money when he got home. And when he got there, they're telling him it doesn't exist. So his psyche got traumatized. He didn't. Plus, I would say this, he probably had some mental health issues already. Something was going on with him, because I don't know why he would think they would take the money and just keep it for him. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's not, mental illness is not always something that happens right away. It can be something that is started when somebody was a child, and something happens later on in life that that brings back that memory in some form or the other, and they become traumatized, and then they go into a state like he did, where he just walks around. It doesn't have to be laughing. He could have been cursing, whatever. But that's maybe he laughed a lot before he got into this state. I don't know. But whatever it is that you're comfortable with is what you're going to be practicing. So maybe he was always a laugher. Maybe he was always a person who avoided reality by laughing. So that's what he resorted to. But that's not always, like I said, that's not always the case with somebody. You understand what I'm saying to you?
Oh,
He was traumatized by that particular thing. But I suggest he had other mental health issues.
So I have a question, Dr. Barnes. What do I do if I'm concerned about my own mental health or someone else's mental health that I may know? How do I go about,
Concern in what regard? Somebody's exhibiting strange behaviors, or
correct. Someone who may be exhibiting strange behavior, or just for some reason stop communicating like they used to. What do you suggest that me as an onlooker?
Well, a lot of it has to do sometimes with age. The numbers for young adults, males especially, is like between the ages of 15 and 23. A lot of, especially young black males, you can watch them and they start develop, not all of them, it's not, I don't have the figures on it, but they'll develop schizophrenic tendencies. So, but you have to know that in order to see it and say something about it. But if you're in a relationship where somebody's changed their behavior patterns, whether it's because of their eating habits, whether it's because they talk less, whatever it is, they cry more, or they never cried before they started crying, it is best to approach them if you think they're intellectually sound enough for you to have a conversation, and ask them, is something wrong? Is something going on? Is something different? Is something going on different in their lives? Why these things are manifesting? But you have to be careful. You have to be very careful, because people, whether they're mentally ill or not, are very, especially black folks. We don't want anybody talking to us about mental illness. We don't want anybody suggesting that there's something wrong with the way we think and the way we're behaving. So you have to be very delicate, very, very careful about how you approach that with somebody.
Now, how would I know if I am well or not from a mental standpoint?
How do you know you're well?
Yeah, some people will walk around looking all good, they function properly and everything, but beneath that, there's a layer of something that's happening to them that I guess others can see. But if I am not well and someone bring it to my attention, I probably would deny it. How is there a way of observing whether or not a person is exhibit certain signs of being unwell?
Is that the same? It's basically the same thing as the first question that you asked.
Mm-hmm.
Is that in order for you to know, you have to be a trained observer.
Okay.
I do not think every day people can go around and be diagnosing people and saying, well, some looks a little funny, and what looks crazy to you is not really crazy to them. Remember, a lot of what we go through in life has to do with cultural differences. It has to do with environmental differences. It has to do with family background. What's normal to you might be very abnormal to me and my family. So somebody might exhibit behaviors that you're thinking to yourself, that's really strange. Why do they eat that way? I mean, it's something as simple as eating habits.
Right.
You can say, they must be crazy. They eat with their hands. Well, some cultures eat with their hands. So we have to be careful that we don't take one culture's behaviors and apply it to somebody else. And when you see people doing things that you consider abnormal, you have to be very careful. Because that word normal and abnormal is we use it very carelessly.
Yes.
And again, it has to do with culture. It has to do with environment. It has to do with individual personalities. I can guarantee you that a person who's schizophrenic, their personalities, if you have two people in a room that's schizophrenic, they have different personalities. They'll exhibit the symptoms differently. So every schizophrenic doesn't behave like the other schizophrenic.
Doctor and nurse. Karen, you are also a health professional, but as a nurse for several years. Between the two of you, could you all please identify for me, or maybe for some of the audience who do not know, we use these words loosely. Schizophrenic.
Yeah.
What is that? And some of the other terms that we tend to throw around loosely.
Why do you use them? Why do you use them? What is it that you're seeing while you use them?
I'm not saying me.
No, I'm just saying in general. I'm saying in general. Why do we use them?
I have no idea. Sometimes we throw them around. Do we really know? When I say we, the general public, what are the symptoms or actions of a schizophrenic person, or do we just throw that label at them?
Okay.
Please clarify that for us, Karen. Bring you into the conversation. What is schizophrenia?
Well, schizophrenia are mentally ill patients who are a bit disconnected from their reality. You know what I mean? As she says, everybody behaves a little bit
Paranoid
schizophrenic is one
schizophrenic
of the scariest patients I've ever dealt with, that I would never turn my back on, because they're very unpredictable in their behavior. They can go from being very serene in one moment, you turn your back and they're ready to attack you. You certainly haven't done anything to provoke an attack, but they're very, very spontaneous in their movements. They're very, there's nothing predictable about them. So you always have to be on your guard and recognize that they are not necessarily connected with you in this moment.
Right.
So you have to be more careful in how you approach, and definitely be respectful how you approach, how you approach them at all times.
But Karen, let me add something to that, what you said, and that's perfectly correct. The other thing is that not every mental illness is a detachment from reality.
Right.
Okay? You can be depressed and be very aware of your surroundings. You can be bipolar and be very aware of your surroundings. A good example right now in our society of bipolar disorder is Kanye West.
Kanye.
Okay? And so he literally goes it's bipolar, from one pole to the other. Extremely happy and laughing to extremely morose and depressed, and making awful, when he's really out there and making with that happiness and that all that silly laughter that he does and stuff, making poor decisions. And those are the people that will end up spending a whole bunch of money just like that, because of the mood swings that they have. So
I think,
go ahead.
One of the things that people tend to believe is that they're highly functioning,
highly intelligent people.
Right.
Bipolar patients are the most intelligent people I've ever met.
Who's that? Say that again.
Bipolar patients.
Bipolar.
Highly intelligent.
Right.
Intelligent people. So there's a belief that there's a myth that they're not functioning at a high level. They usually are, until some trigger, as you stated before, sends them, sort of outside, a little bit off center.
Because Kanye West is brilliant. He's a brilliant man.
Incredibly
creatively brilliant. But the thing is that even our president has the same personality that Kanye West has. I mean, seriously, he does. But that's another subject for another time. So, but the thing is that a depressed person, you talked about obesity earlier, A depressed person can eat so much. Now you try to figure which comes first, the depression or the obesity, the eating. And sometimes people eat so much they become obese. Now they have two problems, the depression and the obesity, which can bring on medical problems, diabetes, hypertension. So there's a whole cohort of symptoms and different things that happens once you have a diagnosis that it becomes this ball of confusion. There are women who have been sexually molested, didn't have a history of psychological problems, didn't have any mental health history to speak of, and they were sexually abused, and all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, I take that out, not all of a sudden, over a period of time, they start withdrawing, they become depressed, and some of them gain a tremendous amount of weight. And one of the reasons for gaining the weight, many of them have said, and I've counseled people like that, is that they figure if they become unattractive, nobody will want to rape them again. Nobody will want to touch them. So it's a lot of things in one diagnosis.
Does depression keep one back from enjoying life?
Of course. Well, I would say the typical depressed person, that's the first thing that usually goes. Their joy, their happiness. Usually that's the first sign. People start withdrawing. They start spending more time alone. Laughter is hard for them. They don't laugh easily. And there are people who are depressed and laugh a lot.
So, doctor, I have another question for you. Can you prevent mental health problems? Is it possible, especially in the climate and the world in which we're living right now, where most things I would say are stressful?
Yeah.
Is there a way to prevent going down that path? Not that you have a choice, but is there a way to prevent it?
Well, it depends, because some mental illness, as I'm sure Karen will tell you, has to do with the chemical imbalance. It's not always about just I don't feel good and somebody died. And mental illness can often be as a result of a chemical imbalance. So that's something that has to be treated in order for the situation to improve. Depression because of someone's death, divorce, those things are more easily treated once it's ruled out that there's no chemical imbalance, because all of that has to be ruled out. When you go to see a therapist, usually they have a questionnaire. They got to ask all these questions because they have to gather information to find out the root of the problem. So a chemical imbalance can have somebody depressed. And when you go to a good doctor, good medical doctor, good psychiatrist, they will do testing and ask the correct questions. And sometimes you'll find it's a nutritional issue. What the people are eating, even alcoholics are often depressed because alcohol, a lot of people doesn't realize that alcohol is not a stimulant, it's a depressant. So what they find out is that what a doctor will find out is that there's something in this person's nutritional behavior, the nutritional regimen that's contributing to the depression.
But one of the things that doctors tend to do...
Karen wanted to say something, Chris. I'm sorry. Karen, you wanted to say?
Well, let me say this point. I want you to speak on this too. I want you to speak on this. One of the things doctors tend to do is medicate. The minute a patient comes in, or a psychiatrist, they recommend some pill that you need to take and they medicate. But doesn't antidepressant drugs put a patient in a state of like suicidal thoughts? How does that help the situation?
That's not a carte blanche thing. It's not all psych medication does that. That's not true. What it is that a good doctor finds out what the root problem is before they medicate. Remember, a psychiatrist is a medical doctor. In order to be a psychiatrist, you have to be a medical doctor. So they're supposed to be more thorough. The psychologists, usually you see them, they don't have the medical degree, and they usually do more talk therapy than anything else. The psychiatrist they do the medicating stuff, but talk therapy, my way of looking at it is talk therapy as well as medication. In some cases, not everybody needs to take medication, but that's a determination that the psychiatrist must make. Not everybody goes to the psychiatrist because some people, depending on the severity of their depression or their anxiety, their bipolar disorder, whatever, depending on the level, that's when you go see a psychiatrist. And a lot of times A person who just takes medication, I don't see them doing that well. I think people need both. I think they need talk therapy as well as medication.
Okay,
When we
doctor,
started
can I just throw I'm sorry, Karen, go ahead. I'm sorry.
when we started this conversation, all of us kept looking at the family, and we joke about it because we're a little uncomfortable talking about our families and the various issues. But then when we started to do a little research and to realize that the family was just a microcosm, just a small, part of it. You have to look at the community, the
Right.
resources available or are not available, and the country. I
Yeah.
remember seeing a documentary, actually. Let me correct that. A couple of years ago about Darfur that had one psychiatrist for the entire country. In Jamaica, one mental health hospital and maybe like 139 outpatient facilities for the entire country. One mental health hospital. That
But
makes
you
no
see,
sense to me.
Karen, part of that issue is what you said, like we talked before, culture.
Culture.
Black folks in general think it's a stigma to be counseled. Nothing
Yes.
is wrong with us. I'll take a white rum, I'll take a beer, I will cuss somebody out, and that's all right. That will take care of the problem. And the bottom line is that before we, sometime before we cuss somebody, maybe we need to check ourselves and say, "You all right, Judith?" Now, personally, what you said, what's your name? I'm sorry.
Karen.
Gelly?
Oh, I'm
Delroy,
sorry.
Not Karen. This gentleman down here.
Delroy.
Delroy. Okay. What you said something about identifying things. Listen, a lot of what we see in our culture is anger, like Jamaicans.
Yes. Hmm.
They said, I mean, I watched a documentary recently, and I'd heard about this years ago, that they said that the majority of people who brought from Africa, that was placed in Jamaica, are some vicious people.
We were
I
the
mean,
ones who tear up the slave masters.
yeah, man, they're not, the anger, the rage.
We spoke about that
Um,
last week.
okay, I heard this guy named Trevor Burbick used to be a boxer, and
Hmm.
he left America and went home to Jamaica, and they said he was arguing with this guy, and the guy said, "Hold on a minute, soon come back." No, his foolish self, he should have moved. The man said, "Soon come back." I would have ran. And they said the man come back with a cutlass and he chop him. They said they chop him up like goat meat.
Oh, you serious?
Yes, he killed him. So the thing is, this is that one of the things that even in America right now, one of the things that's killing us is we deny everything that's unpleasant to us. Anything we don't like. No, 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 man, no, man. We're not crazy. Oh, times rough and whatever, we're not crazy. And so I take a beer, I take a rum, but then that wears off and the stuff comes back again. So a lot of Jamaicans, I believe, like anywhere else in the world, we have a lot of stress that we live under. And that stress turns into other things that we don't want to identify. Go ahead, Delroy.
Yes. My next question is this. Okay, we're living in America and we are exposed to so many things. And I'm talking, when I say we, I mean Caribbean people, American people, we all are in the same boat together. Um, do you believe that to an extent we all have developed some kind of mental um, problem because of the treatment historically that Black Americans more so, and us now living in this country have experienced on a daily basis? How does that affect us mentally as we
I
go throughout our day-to-day activities?
I think that West Indians as a whole, and this is a problem for me. I've had it since I've been here. I think West Indians as, on a whole has to be very careful how we treat African Americans. Um, some of us have the attitude that they're lazy, they're this and that, and there's some of that, but there's some lazy Jamaicans too and lazy
Exactly.
Canadians. So what I feel is that a lot of us are here, especially Jamaicans, and we have this attitude that they're Black Americans and we are different from them. And some even say we are better than them. And there's a lot of cultural differences, but there are a lot of cultural similarities also because I've been married to African American, and the culture is similar even in terms of food. We might call it different names, things that we eat, but they're similar. But what Black Americans went through so that we can walk into Macy's without any problem per se. What not this generation of Black Americans, but what they went through, where their grandparents went through, was serious stuff. It was, and you wonder, there is mental illness in the Black community, because that must make that has to leave some kind of pressure on you. So they deny, just like how Jamaicans and West Indians as a whole deny mental health issues. But I really believe that we need, as Caribbean people, to be more inclusive of African Americans. We need to stop acting like we're better than them. This country that we're in, to a large degree, it's palatable for us because of what they went through. And I tell you one thing, when a policeman see you, he don't see Jamaican. He sees oh, there's a nice Jamaican over there. And that's all dirty America. No. When I first came here, what I found that white people were doing is that they would say to you, oh, you're the good Blacks. And so they would make you feel superior to the Americans.
Yeah.
But when I was a child, I had a pretty good brain. And I thought to myself, I said, nah, this is craziness. You're trying to mess with me. So when Jamaicans start saying, oh, yes, we're not like African Americans, we're Black Americans. We're better than them. Crap.
We do it to our own also.
Listen, I shouldn't even get into this, because this is another mental illness. Now, this is mental illness. The self-hatred that Black people carry, it's mental illness. It should be in the DSM-5, 7, whatever it is out there now, because it's self-hate. And even in Jamaica, when you look at how Black people treat each other, oh, somebody use your color because you're a Blackie. That is mental illness. I don't care what anybody says. I say it's mental illness.
And then you have mulatto. Mulatto.
Listen, there was a term when I first came to America. If you're Black, if you're brown, if you're white, you're all right. If you're brown, stick around. If you're Black, step back.
Yeah.
It's still in existence.
Yeah, it still exists.
So the problem is, I am saying it's a mental health problem, because the weave that we do, all the weaves that Black folks do, and all this. Do you realize the movie stars in Hollywood? Do you look at the Black movie stars and realize how they're getting lighter and lighter? See, you asked earlier about mental illness. One of the ways to find out if you're mentally ill or anybody else is to pay attention to your own behaviors.
Yeah.
Read, pay attention, because in this situation that we're in now in this country, stress is on the increase. It is easy for people to become depressed and don't even know they're depressed right now.
But what about people like performing artists? I need for you to jump in on this, Sometimes performing artists are labeled as we on the edge of insanity, because the stuff that we hear, other people can't hear it. It's almost like a dog whistle. You blow a whistle that's silent and Lassie comes running home, and you want to know what it is Lassie heard that you can't hear. A performing artist or a musician who hears stuff that the average public cannot hear, and sometimes you tune them out and you're listening to these voices in your head, and you're saying, we on a different frequency. As performing artists.
Listen, the way you're describing it, you're talking like you're talking about a schizophrenic person. What you're talking about sometimes is artistic genius. Okay? And one of the things I mentioned earlier, I'm a strong believer in God. I believe in God. I have seen God move and do awesome things in my life. And I turned 65 last year. And around July, I turned 65 in February last year. And shortly after that, in July, I needed a painting for my house. It's got a new house and the ceilings are really high. And I needed a painting. And somebody said, if you get a small paint, it's going to look like a postage stamp. So you need a big painting. So I had this lady, she was supposed to paint it for me. And she didn't respond as fast as I thought she would. And one evening I was standing right here in my kitchen at the sink. And you talk about hearing voices. The Holy Spirit said to me, you can paint your own paintings, you know. Now, I've never taken an art class. I've never done anything creatively. I had no interest in painting anything. And I laughed. I said, get out of here. Now, that's how I talk to God. That's my relationship. I said, get out of here. I can't paint anything. But what I did is that because I'm working on being obedient, I left this kitchen and went to the art store close by. And I've painted over 200 paintings since last July. I have sold paintings. Now I'm talking about I've painted and cried because I didn't know where that came from. I'm like, I can't draw. What is that? And I'm not boasting in me. People are like, how did you do it? I said, I got that from the Holy Spirit. Now somebody can say I'm hearing voices. That's okay. Hey, the voice that I heard is helping me to do some beautiful paintings, and I'm selling them. I'm making money. So I'll hear that voice again and again. So when it comes to creativity, you listen, let's understand something. People who are very talented and very creative, I'll say like you, Curtis. People like Bob Marley, people like Michael Jackson, people who are that the way they express themselves and to the degree they express themselves, they don't walk to the beat of the drummers that you see around here. They do walk to the beat of a different drum.
Thank you.
That's helpful. Okay.
I believe that.
Mr.
What
Archer?
people do that does not bring any kind of positive results. It does not bring anything. For instance, I tell you, I'm a guitarist. Now I told myself that, right? And I tell you, and I get a guitar and I start and I'm playing pure nonsense. That's mental illness as far as I'm concerned. But if I buy the guitar and I can play a tune, that's creative genius. And I never took a lesson. You understand what I'm saying? So what we have to be careful. Kanye West is a brilliant young man, but his personality. I want people to pay attention. His personality. He loves to shock people, kind of like you, Curtis. He likes to shock people. The shock value is why he stops taking his medication. If he really does stop taking it.
So are you saying I'm supposed to be on medication because I'm shocking people?
Well, maybe Karen would know that better. I haven't seen him that much.
Don't put me into that one.
You need medication, Dr. Henry?
Sam, I need for you to help me on this conversation here as a creative genius yourself.
I'm gonna pause my mic.
Those voices, I tell people that you're jealous because the voice is not talking to you. But on everything that I am, I swear, it is almost like there's a little guy sitting on my shoulder here talking to me when I'm writing a song. And I have to tune into what he's telling me. And I write, and sometimes I block out. The information is coming so fast, I have to block out everything else around me and just write. And then someone bursts into the room and interrupt me, and the guy leaves. And then when I look at the paper...
Let me ask you a question. Why do you have to call it a person? Why can't you say you have a creative, you have a creative edge, your creative compartment, and you have a more practical compartment? Why do you have to call it a person? So
it's almost that real to me. It's like I'm literally hearing someone whispering in my ear, and I have to write what it is I'm being told. And the minute I disconnect from this, it goes away. But most times, if I pay attention and I write, by the time this voice goes away and I look at the paper, it's complete. It's done.
Okay, doctor.
So you're listeing. I mean, I guess there's a thin line as with musicians and really composers. If you're into songwriting, we have to go into that imaginary realm or that dimension of where we tap into the universe and we're hearing all types of stuff. Sometimes, let's say we do an example. And yes, sir.
Are you hearing me?
Are you a musician?
Oh, the doctor is speaking. Oops.
Are you a musician?
Yes.
Oh, okay. What do you play? What instruments do you play? Or do you sing?
Keyboard.
Okay. All right, go ahead. I'm sorry. I just wanted to know.
And he does sing.
A little bit of singing, yes.
Yeah, right.
A little bit.
Yeah, right. So such humility. How many albums you have completed, Sam? Stop.
Okay, I'll stop. We'll stop. Yes. I'm multitasking because but anyway, that's not important, right? But in terms of I was going to make a quick point. I was actually going to have us do a quick exercise where at the count of 3, you say your name without actually saying it physically, and then you'll actually hear, so let's try it out. 1, 2, 3, and say your name inside the head. Did you hear a voice?
I didn't.
I
Yes,
did.
mine said Curtis Genius Henry. That's not my middle name, but that's what I heard.
You didn't say it physically. So what voice did you hear?
My
Well,
own.
you know what? That's a good. What do they call that? They call it suggestion. What do they call it? Auto suggestion.
Okay. Okay, we have about 5 minutes to go, Doctor. I have one final question I want to ask, and hopefully everyone else has a question they want to ask. My next question, my final question would be, what does one do if support doesn't help, or if they seek help and it just doesn't help for some reason? What is there anything that person can do after that if it doesn't help?
The person who needs the help, or the person who's helping, who needs the help.
Needs the help.
Well, there's a lot of help out there. I mean, the thing is that people don't ask for help because, as Karen said earlier, the stigma, or people feel it's stigmatized. But there's a lot of, matter of fact, I'm going to send to Curtis some general diagnoses like schizophrenia. I'm going to send you just the DSM definition of these things. And I'm also going to send you some information about places that people can go. That if you know somebody, they can go, whether it's in Delaware or Jersey or wherever, that you can get mental health help. So the thing is that, first of all, in anything, whether it's a medical or a psychological issue, until a person says something is wrong with me, nothing's going to get done. Okay? So people have to the first major illness that I see in this country, mental health wise, is denial. Everybody just about denies anything that's wrong with them. So we have to get to the place where we say, for instance, I use me. My mom just died. She died 3 weeks ago. She was buried last Thursday. My mom is 95 years old. I loved my mother dearly. I am not gonna, somebody told me the other day, you're a professional and you should be. I said, excuse me? So you mean to tell me because I'm a professional, my mother's death shouldn't bother me?
I know, right?
Now it doesn't bother me that because I know where she is, and I know I'll see her again. I know that because of the life that I live. But I will miss her. I miss my mom. We used to talk often, almost every day. I miss calling her. I miss the jokes that she told me and that I told her. So when somebody tells me, well, you're a professional, it shouldn't affect you that kind of way or whatever, that's crazy. Well, not crazy. It's not healthy to tell me that. So the thing is that what we have to understand, now I totally forgot what I was saying to you. What did you ask? Oh, about identifying the problem. Yes. So I'll send you that information. So if you see somebody, sometimes you can say to somebody, listen, I got some information I'd like to share with you. And so that, because you can't really forcefully tell somebody there's something wrong with them. So that's one of the ways of trying to help somebody is that, listen, I got some information that I think you might be interested in, and I could share it with you. Because most people will not say there's something wrong. So that's the first thing, is to say, there's something wrong with me, I need to get some help. And few people will do that. But if you're able to share information and you're in maybe a family situation or whatever, you can make suggestions and see what happens.
Awesome. And having said that, Doctor, we want to thank you for coming on, and we hope that we can have you on again in the near future. We have come to the end of the broadcast. Any final thoughts before we go from anyone?
I'd like to say, I'll rest the blame squarely on the shoulders of Judith Barnes. Whatever you all see wrong with me today, this is the woman that encouraged me 35 years ago to put pen to paper and begin writing. She asked me to do a poem, and she asked me to do 2 poems, and she gave me 2 months to complete them. I made every excuse
when I told him that.
I made the excuse in the book not to do it. 1 week before the deadline, I approached her and I said, I'm sorry, but I can't do it. She said, you still have a week.
Dr. Barnes, don't worry about it. Your work on her.
She is responsible for all everything that you see wrong with me today. She's the one that encouraged me to put pen to paper and tune in those voices. So whatever I'm hearing now, it's because She's the one that put what you said, Jumbi for me. I made me start right. That's the one you said sitting there responsible for my madness. Right now, I have 10 books.
Okay,
I
folks,
have
thank
about
you
10
guys so much. We
10 books
appreciate
written
you.
and several songs and poems, all because of this woman here. So she responsible. This one right there, she responsible.
Listen. I'm a vessel of the Lord.
I
If you
think
use me to do that,
Curtis
that's
took
fine.
all the
All the
Thank you,
time.
remarks.
Dr. Ban.
He took all
Thank you so much.
the commentaries.
She gave me hot. She gave me hot. I had
Thank
Karen,
you.
you have
Have a
any
great
closing
evening.
remarks, Karen?
And we'll be back here next week, same time. Well, we may adjust the time to a little bit earlier. But once again, thank you all for being here. Thanks again, Dr. Barnes.
Thank you for having me.
You've given
Thank
us
you
a
for having me.
great information.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great
Thank
one.
you.
Thank you.
I would
Nice
like
to
to
meet you
extend an
all.
invitation for her to join us for the corporal punishment
Oh, yes.
segment that we plan to have.
Oh, I used to work in the prison system.
Awesome.
I think that is
Cool.
She looks like she's very
I
familiar
think
with
should
that.
be great. Thank you.
I
All
am.
right, everyone. Have a good night.
God bless you all.
Have a blessed one.